Welcome to Jam Sessions backstage at Nova Scotia Music Week 2021. I'm Andrew from Andrew's Alcove and the Second Button podcast. And with me is a co-host from Jam Sessions,
Darcy Walsh. Hello, hello.
And with us now we have Connor James from June Body. June Body makes the most of a trio lineup. Soaring vocal harmonies and danceable pop rock hooks give way to tender, melancholic lows, creating a varied performance that maintains a focus on lyricism and audience connection. Sonically, the band sways between the punchiness of modern rock and the nostalgic, jangly tones of the 90s alternative. Razorcake says they are poetry backed by inane stage action.
Hello, Connor, and welcome.
Hi.
So, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
When I was looking into June Body, I did have... I had said this to a couple people, so the listeners are probably getting sick of my explanation. I'm going to tell a little quicker. I had to research about a dozen bands in the end. Mm-hmm. And so typically I'd spend a lot more time individually on the artist that I'm going into. So I kind of cheated and made rough notes that was going to be good enough. But you're one of the people that when I was getting closer to and I sort of went back to things, I'm like, well, this is a good question. But I ended up going back to it and answered my own questions.
Okay. Now I'm curious.
Yeah, so if I say anything that sounds like I'm stating it as a fact, feel free as the actual person I'm speaking about to correct me and tell everyone I'm wrong.
I'll just get my lawyer into the room.
Yes, exactly.
It's like when Wired does the Wikipedia read.
Yes.
You see that?
Yeah.
They read off Wikipedia and you correct your own Wikipedia page.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty good. So this would actually be a good example of that.
I don't have a Wikipedia page, though. But if I did, I would be on there editing it daily.
Yes, absolutely.
I have my name on there as a bandmate, but then I got deleted. So
where are you based now?
We're based in Halifax.
Okay. And originally, are you from Nova Scotia originally? Because you were in Ontario.
I grew up in Ottawa.
Okay.
So I started basically as a solo artist, like just playing open mics and stuff like that. And I was just like a solo acoustic act in Ottawa.
Yeah. And at the time, were you going by your own name or by June Body?
Yeah, I think I was just like Connor.
Okay.
Like I didn't really have a name. Like I was just putting out like, bedroom recordings and stuff like that and just playing little shows and like going to punk shows in Ottawa. There's that scene there is actually quite vibrant and has only grown since I left.
Yeah, we've been talking about scenes a lot, but I have always known that Halifax has always had little bits of a scene, and there's points where it flares up, like the whole ebbs and flows. But I know I've always been aware of Ottawa, but I've never been there to spend time around it, but you always hear about the Ottawa scene.
Yeah, and I mean, optically, Ottawa doesn't seem like a particularly music-forward or art-forward place because it's very...
Well, we were just talking about gentrification, but it's almost like Ottawa. It's like it was gentrified at its birth. Like it's that type of a place.
Ottawa's thing is that it's like it's so clean, and they pour so much money into making their city look nice, and they're like, "Hey, look, we're just like Toronto and Montreal, right?" And everyone's like, "Well, no, you have no real like you're not amplifying your cultural." Elements and so the scenes are so vibrant because they're kind of like pushing back against what Ottawa feels like to outsiders.
Excellent. You answered my follow-up. That's exactly what I was getting at, is that it almost kind of that environment almost kind of produces that type of music scene where there's a scene because of that environment.
Absolutely. Yeah. People are fending for themselves and it creates a sense of like a really tight-knit community. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the scene in Ottawa was cool. I lived in Toronto for a while as well, like after I graduated from university in Ottawa and moved there, and was basically doing the same thing that I was doing in Ottawa, like performing as a solo act. Mm-hmm. But it got to this point where I was starting to hear my music with a band behind it. Yeah. And I couldn't get over that, and so I was trying to start a band in Toronto, but it's really hard to maintain connections with people there. Like everyone lives, so far away from each other. Like, even if you live in the same city, you could potentially be like a 45-minute subway ride.
Sure. Whereas opposed to here, you're probably not any more than a couple hours from somebody that like lives relatively far away. It's just that we have a different type of infrastructure here for getting back and forth. We're a different layout.
Yeah, absolutely. And the scene is smaller, right? So everyone kind of knows everyone. So like that's how we were able to find our current drummer, was just by being involved in the scene. It was just sort of a name that kind of like popped up. But I don't really think that would be the case in Toronto, because it's such a vast ocean of players and like bands, you know, like coming from other locations as well, and it's just it was kind of a bit insane.
Yeah. So kind of go into that too. Then you were performing as a solo act, and at a point while you were still in Ontario, you started using the name June Body, which that name, by the way, everyone loves it.
I actually was hanging out with like a friend of a friend at a bar, and he was like, "Yeah, I've heard of your band, and I listened to some of your songs, but yeah, I really don't like your band name."
Oh, really? The opposite.
So there is at least one person who
That's
doesn't
funny.
like
That one person.
Yeah, no, I've heard it repeatedly. A few people have said, "Oh man, I really like," or they see the sticker around and they just say they really like the name. They don't
That's
know who you
awesome.
are.
Great.
I'm assuming that you're getting a lot of new followers and links and downloads and everything over the weekend. So that's a good thing for
It's
you.
got a ring to it. I mean, how I found the band name was I was walking through this random side street in Bangkok, Thailand, and there was a store called June Body. They did
really?
like.
Doesn't even
It was like
make any
body
sense.
piercings and stuff like that, and like some like swimsuits and whatever. And I walked by and I looked up, and I was like, if I ever start a band, it's going to be called that.
It makes me think of like in the spring when you drive around, you see like Subway will advertise like get ready for beach season and stuff, because like come June,
Get your June body
you have
ready.
the body that you're gonna have for the summer. It's just that you think that it's time to get in shape.
Or it's like you want your June body to be your best body. Because
Yeah,
it's going to be the most visible.
It's your
inherently because
transition
the weather's
phase.
hot. You have to take your clothes off.
Yes.
But I don't want people to feel like, oh my god, like right, my June body, I need to get it ready. It's like you can just be you.
You're absolutely right. I'm chubby.
Thanks. So you ended up fleshing out the band with the other two members after you moved to Halifax?
Yeah, so I basically recorded almost like it was kind of like a demo tape of 3 songs in Toronto with a friend of mine.
Is that Fragility?
The Fragility EP, yeah. You've dug deep. And that was like I recorded that with my friend Louis Conter in Toronto, just like in his apartment. And that was sort of meant to be like a tape to entice players once I got
it's
to
like
Halifax.
a shopping demo for I need musicians for a band.
Because I knew I was moving, but I'm like, I want to have something that I can give to people right away in the scene to try to attract players. And it worked. I actually found our current bassist, Alex Callahan, through an ad. I posted an ad on Kijiji, and I linked the Fragility EP. And that's what he liked it and came over, and the rest is history.
And then Dylan was added after the fact.
Dylan was added after the fact, and then he had to move back to New York, and so we needed a new drummer. At that point, we'd already been playing shows and like involved in the scene, and so there were a few drummers' names that came up, and Johnny was one of them. So
Excellent. Okay, now for yourself, when you were doing the music in Ontario, you just said like you're kind of already were gravitating towards having the full fleshed out band. Now that you have that, is there anything that you could use to describe the difference between, like you said, I went a little deep here with it, and then I knew I did the soft dive, and then I went back and did the deep dive and kind of fleshed it out a little. But what I was curious is if you notice now a difference between, and this is a different version of my original question. Originally, I was going to ask you why there was a disconnect between the old and new June Body, that it was obviously you, but what was the difference? So I figured that out. It's that I started in early with the EP, that was you, and now you're down here and you have a band. So that part I've answered, but for you yourself as the person that's performing these songs, is there a difference in songwriting? Like for the newer content that you guys have, like your Never Here for Long has 3 singles off it already? Is that?
yeah, I mean the album's out, but it has 3 singles that were released preemptively.
So is there a different songwriting technique? Like, did you write all those songs and then bring it to the other guys and they helped you flesh it out? And I do know that there's a very good way for people to find out. If they go to YouTube, they can watch your little behind the scenes videos for all of those songs as they go along. So I definitely recommend people do that. It's worth the time. But yeah, for yourself, just what kind of a difference is there, and what's the songwriting process like with the 3 people versus when you were writing something with a vision of this is where I want to be with more people?
I don't think that like my process of writing a song has changed really to any degree. Like,
which is good.
Yeah, it's always the same formula. Like, it's me with an acoustic guitar sitting on my bed, something just happens, and that's how the song always starts. I've never written a song that didn't start that way.
Sure.
But with that said, my current bandmates, Alex especially, is very blunt. In a really positive way. And because we've been playing together for a few years now, like he understands our sound and the best avenue for it to go. And he just has a really good knack for hearing a song and understanding the best things for it.
Yeah.
So when I bring demos to them, I'll just throw demos in like a Google Drive or whatever. Sometimes they're like, this song just kind of sucks. Like, it's just boring. And it just gets dropped. But their contributions are really, they just make the songs breathe.
Sure.
And then their injections sometimes inherently completely change the song.
Yeah.
Whether it's like the lyrics, the structure of it, its whole kind of like sound. But it's always like a collaborative approach. Like, I wouldn't really say I'm the type of person that's like, no, we're going to keep it this way. I want to find that spot where everyone is so stoked on the song. I'm not like one of those tyrannical frontmen that's like, do it my way.
Sure, yeah. Now, in one of the pieces I was reading as I went through, it may have been you yourself drawing the comparison. I'm not sure if it was you or the person that was authoring what I was reading, but a comparison, or maybe a little bit of influence being Death Cab for Cutie. Is that...
We get that pretty much after every show. Someone will come up to us and say, you guys really sound like Death Cab for Cutie.
Yeah, I wouldn't have... I know, I'm familiar with them, and the way you're describing the songwriting sounds similar to what I would hear from an interview with Ben's, the guy from that.
Ben Gibbard.
Yeah, so it sounds similar to what I've heard him say, but I don't hear that necessarily. But I did immediately notice, and a couple other people that I've been talking to that were listening to some of June Body as a new band to them, the lyrics, you definitely have a darker lyrical content, but the music doesn't suggest that as far as the sound and vibe, which my personal collection of music, I could probably name half a dozen bands that have done that over the years that I am into some degree. But for the new listeners to the podcast or people that are discovering you through Music Week here, that sound has an upbeat rock sound. Very,
it's kind of dancey.
It's radio friendly, foot tapping. But when you start to get into lyrics, there's some cutting, deep thought in there. Is it you writing all those lyrics, or is that also collaborative?
I write all the lyrics.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you find a balance between... I love that type of thing, but I think the reason that I like it is that if I hear a happier song... If the song vibe makes me happy, I don't think of lyrics, period. If it's a darker vibe, then you get dark thoughts in your head, and that's where it comes from. But you're blending two things together.
Right.
The first time I ever noticed it myself was the Cardigans years ago. They had one big hit that really made them recognized, but I started diving into them back then, and I'm like, wow, like, these guys are not what people are seeing out there. Like, even their image was, we're radio rock, and it's friendly, and here's a pretty front person, we'll put them out there, but the lyrics were always really dark if you ever sat and listened to them. So when you're sitting in a car driving along and singing along, you're like, wow, there's a completely different vibe going on here.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from like my favorite artist of all time is Elliott Smith. And
Okay.
he has this really kind of like often just like da, 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 this thumpy kind of Beatles thing, but like the darkest lyrics you've ever heard sometimes. And I think that juxtaposition is really enjoyable for listeners.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that like I've been like trying
It's not
to do
deliberate,
what I'm doing. Yeah. But I also just think that for me, like when I'm hearing a song that has darker lyrics or subject matter or whatever, it's not making me feel particularly dark.
Yeah.
Or when I'm performing these songs and I'm singing these like really dark things, I'm not feeling that way. It's just something that I had to outlet in a particular moment, and now I have control over that because I've harnessed what I wrote. Mm-hmm. I have control over those emotions now, and I get to sing them to you. It's like really, it's really empowering. Like people, you know, like my mother would be like, "Oh, like why, like
why did you
like,
say
saying,
that?"
like it's so dark?" And I'm just like, well, because I don't have to outlet when I'm happy.
Right.
Like when I'm happy, I'm just like, great.
Well, and I think that's kind of what I was getting, like, not that I'm a writer, but lyrics don't pop into my head if I hear something that makes me feel good. I'm listening to what you're singing, but I'm not thinking up words. If you start listening to something darker, it almost lends yourself to it because your brain's been like wired over years of a heavy band sounds like this and a band like this sounds like this. So I think that's why mentally I do like that dynamic of having the back and forth, that it's challenging my brain to be able to process that dark lyric.
Right, you're dancing along
but still intellectually stimulate it while
Right.
you're doing the brainless popping along. So it's nice. It's a nice balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, some of my favorite bands are... I think it ultimately just comes down to a projection of your honest self.
Sure.
And if that means that, you know, that particular singer or lyricist is, you know, when they wrote those songs, that's what was important to them. They were feeling an emotional connection to certain subject matter. That's what they needed to get out in that moment. Mm-hmm. And there's no better feeling than accurately capturing an extremely honest wave of emotions in song. Like when I get something, even if it like I've written songs like while I'm writing them, I'm like crying because I'm like, I'm forcing myself to tap in to these like really sad or shitty things.
Yeah.
But then once you're kind of proud of yourself when you look back and you see like, wow, I had the power and the courage to tap into that and get that on the page in an artistic way. It's so liberating and it's a great feeling.
Oh, it's awesome. It's apparent. It is from listening to it. And I did want to give the full album listen, but I did not. Those three that you had as singles, if we were to add any to the end of this recording so the listeners can actually hear what we're talking about, I assume that out of your catalog, you'd gravitate towards one or two of those three. Or is
I think, well, I mean, the song that's definitely like being the most listened to is Flickering. That was the first single that we dropped.
And is there a second one you'd like us to add just to give a little bit of something else to compare it to?
Yeah, I mean, there is a song on that record that I think really juxtaposes. It's early on. It's the second song. It's called Ember.
Okay.
And it's quite gritty, and like the lyrics are... People seem to be really connecting with the lyrics. Like I've run into a couple of people that came up to me and mentioned that like specific lines from that song. They're like, "Did you write that?" And
that's going to be awesome.
So it's so weird sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you're stuck in your own world as an artist. It's almost like you feel like no one's actually really listening, but they are. Like there are people who are listening to your songs and actively connecting with the lyrics and analyzing it, like you're doing.
Yeah.
But when someone actually comes up to you and tells you something specific about your song that you wrote,
this made me think of this, or this made me feel this way.
Yeah, it's kind of jarring.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. Yeah, absolutely. What has the weekend been like for you then, as far as like you have a little bit of experience being in, like you said, you started up in Ottawa, so you've been around a little bit of a different environment before, and now we're not out of the pandemic, but we're starting to open things back up. So now that there's starting to be a live scene again, and that I know I've seen you quite a few times this weekend, so you've been making your rounds with most of the guests we had.
Yeah.
How's the weekend been? Did you accomplish your goals? Did you perform already, or you have?
No, we're performing tonight. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 12:15.
8:15. Yeah.
Oh, 8:15.
Yeah.
Nice and earlier in the day then.
I think we're the first band on because
is that
a
here?
band called Book Buddies had to cancel before us.
Oh, that's what the change was. I heard about the Book Buddies thing.
Yeah, we're still at the same time though, 8:15 upstairs. Yeah.
Okay, and that's upstairs here at the Inn and Prince. Okay, so obviously this is too late for the listeners to be able to go see it.
Cut it.
When should
Jump in your DeLorean and come back to today?
Yeah, should they just check your website if they want to see you live sometime?
Absolutely, yeah. If you go to junebodyband.com and just hit the shows tab, it's always updated with everything we have going on and links for tickets. You can follow us on Instagram at junebodyband. For all our updates are on there as well.
Perfect.
But the website's pretty much got everything you need.
And did you have anything else there other than as far as where to purchase the album, I guess? Bandcamp, or is there...
You can definitely buy the album on Bandcamp. We also have we have CDs that are available. You can buy them at junebody.bandcamp.com.
Okay.
If you buy the physical album, it includes the digital one.
Cool.
But also, like, it's helpful if you're streaming it, honestly. Like, if you're listening to it on Spotify, Apple Music...
That is one thing I can share. We in the podcast in the past, we've always been big supporters of pushing Bandcamp, even if the artist isn't mentioning it, just because as fans, we realize the pay what you want model is actually really allows people to be able to support the people they like.
Yeah, we have so many people that consistently support us on Bandcamp, and Bandcamp, what it does is, like, when someone buys your album, it says, like, supported by. Like, if you go to a band's page, it says supported by. And you can kind of see all the names. So I can actually see which specific people, connected or rather bought something. And all our merch is there, too. So if you come to our page, you can click the merch tab and buy merch from us.
So you shouldn't tell your friends, I bought your album on Bandcamp, because they know you didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
You're like, well, let me see it. You're like, just a second,
are.
I'm taking a call. You're scrolling, looking. You're like, I don't see him anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, anybody listening, don't feel bad about calling them up on Spotify, because it does matter. The same as everything I've been learning with doing the podcast. Like, if somebody clicks on it and listens, you have a download. It puts your numbers up. It tweaks the algorithm, so you're going to be pushed to more people, and it just gives you more exposure. So
absolutely, it gets us onto people's, like, release radar as well, which was big for us with this release. I had a lot of people being like, your band was on my release radar. And it's because we did a very, like, Spotify heavy pre-release promotion where we were like just pumping, like, follow us on Spotify.
Sure.
Like, just targeting that one platform, not being like, follow us on Spotify, like Apple Music, Deezer or whatever, just, like, focusing our avenue on like one thing. And you're always going to have the people that are really supportive who are going to go buy your album on Bandcamp or whatever. But in this day and age, like, your streaming numbers will, like, get you showcase slots. Like, they'll get you booked for shows, and it's because all your streams and your monthly listeners and your followers everyone can see that. So if someone goes to your page, it's quite often that you'll get disregarded if you have low streaming numbers or low, like, monthly listeners, because somehow people equate low monthly listeners with low quality of music.
And I see that, and when I didn't understand it, and the model didn't make sense to me. The Bandcamp thing always just seemed like and, like, I love physical merch, so I mean, seeing that stuff on there is awesome.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
But now that I had to do a crunched timeline for a bunch of research, I found that accidentally, without intentionally setting out to do it, if I go, like, you as an example, because you're someone who researched, if I bring you up on Spotify just to see what shows up there, And with independent bands, you can't rely on just that. But when I did, I instantly look and go, oh, if there's say a dozen songs show up for a random artist, I look to see which ones have the most downloads. Not because me as a fan wants to hear those songs first, but because me as a researcher figures those are the ones that people are listening to. Yeah. So if anyone listens to my podcast to hear more about Connor from June Body, they want me to reference the songs that they know. Like, at the very least, as an opening door for people to go, okay, this is why it's relevant, because, yeah.
Well, for sure. And I think that's actually a positive thing where people go to our page and they see like, oh, like Flickering is really getting streamed. Mm-hmm. And then it's sort of this like compound interest on the song where it's like, if you have a bunch of people just sharing one song, it's almost more helpful than people sharing a bunch of different songs.
Right.
Because then people are like Flickering, like, what is this? What is it? Like when we put that single out, it like really connected with people. And people kept sharing it. And so that is almost sort of like spearheading the album. And then if people like that song, then they dive into the album in full. And it's kind of nice because that song it like kicks off the B-side of the album. So you kind of have to get through a bunch of new stuff. Yeah. And then you get rewarded with that song, and then it kind of carries.
Yeah, so people are organically using their interest level to decide whether or not they're going to get into the rest of it. So you're introducing them to an option, so it's just smooth. Like they don't feel like they're like, oh, I liked this snippet I heard of this song, so I have to buy the album and listen to it and give it a few listens to see if I'm into it. They can just gradually start bleeding out to the other tracks on the album and decide if they like it or not. And
listen, like we understand that that most music listeners consume music in a like playlist singles type way, right? There's nothing we can do about that. Like we all the members of June Body are like album listeners. Like
we both are as well.
We have record collections. Like we listen to albums in full. That's just our preference. We think that like a really well put together album is like an experience in itself, right? And so like that's how we make records and projects is we think a lot about sequencing and about which, like, are all these songs cohesive?
Right.
But we also have to understand that they're, like, that's not everyone, right? So
there's many people that are just, whatever came up on, Spotify. Like I said, I'm not trying to pick on Spotify because it is helping people and it is easily accessible and a lot of people use it or are at very least aware of it because it is becoming the more well-known platform for that type of thing. I've associated a negative connotation with it because I'm like, well, they don't get any money from it. And Taylor Swift says it's bad or whatever you hear in the news, right? But now they actually get into it.
It's not like, it's not giving me any money.
Right.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, they own us now. Like, you know what I mean? Like we have to be performing well on your platform.
Well, they're a trendsetter now.
Like, they are. So we kind of have to, it's like, all right, this is just the thing. So, we kind of have to play into it a bit. So, that factored into picking, which songs were going to be the singles. Songs that maybe were a bit shorter, a bit more radio friendly, and would kind of fit well into a playlist where just the song kicks off right away and you're like, oh yeah, this song.
Right.
But then those album listeners can access all those kind of deep cuts if they want to go to our record.
Well, that's perfect. And we will add those songs to the end of this so our listeners will just segue right into that. And then after this conversation, I'm like, well, I have to go to Spotify. I'm going to listen to the full album. And they're going to be like, it was so good.
Listen repeatedly.
I'm going to go to Bandcamp and I'm going to overpay for every one of these.
Yeah.
So now everyone has a strategy going into Christmas. Everyone's getting June Body for Christmas.
Everyone's getting June Body CDs. We have lots. We'll mail them to you. We'll probably put some free stuff in your CD.
Stocking stuffers.
Stocking stuffers. You can stuff our t-shirts into your stockings, let me tell you.
There you go.
They're very stuffable.
Very stuffable.
So I think we covered everything
That's
here.
about it.
And I don't want to keep you too long. I know everybody's got a busy schedule. So, Andrew, if you want to wrap her up.
Thanks for coming out and
Thank you so
letting
much
us
for
talk to you.
It was a blast.
And we'll have some links in our show notes to your songs and stuff.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Great. Thank you again. And I really do appreciate you taking the time. And when we're doing some more podcasting in the future, I might reach out to you again, see if maybe we can get an update and see where you guys are.
That'd be really cool. Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks for listening, and we have more coming up soon. Bye for now.
Skills to lie to my therapist, so I pay the bill for what's inside. I have the skills to lie to the one I lay beside. I was 5, I was barely alive, too stubborn to even want to go outside. 20 years later and it's amplified, I could care less about my life. But you'll miss the point, 'cause I won't check out now. Breaking point isn't now, then flip a coin forever. And I was banking on a miracle Sunday. I was begging you for more time, but every wish that ever comes true will burn down to whenever in my mind. I have the skills to lie to my therapist, so I pay the bill for what's inside. I have the skills to lie to the one I lay beside. Dive at face value, I'm fine. The smell of burning rubbers from the top of my spine. When I sing, it seems amplified. I can care less about my life. But you'll miss the point, 'cause I won't check out now. If the breaking point isn't now, then flip the coin forever. And I was banking on a miracle Sunday. I was begging you for more time, but every wish that ever comes true will burn down to whenever in my mind. I became fixed on the idea of someday. I was flanking it from both sides, but every wish that ever comes true will burn down to whenever in my mind. Let's go! Begging you for more time, but every wish that ever comes true will burn down to whenever in my mind. I became fixed on the idea of someday. I was flanking it from both sides, but every wish that ever comes true will burn down to whenever in my mind. I have the skills to lie to my therapist, so I pay the bill for what's inside. I have the skills to lie to the one I lay beside. I woke up on a day like any other, but a star had moved out of the sky. So I flash back to every moment in the past I could have changed to save his life. And I woke up to a call from my mother as she spoke. I could hear her cry. She begged me to call her anytime, even if it meant goodbye. In every way now, there's pain that can't be seen. Hidden deep down, your brain's flickering, gleam flickering, flickering. beautiful, you were love. I miss you, I can hear you so clearly. And every day